Hi, everyone. This is Jason Burek of Wall Street from Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street from Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a returning guest. She's founder and president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce. And about a month ago, she had the third annual DC Blockchain Summit. Perianne Boring, thank you for joining me again.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Now, Perianne, I really enjoyed your conference. I thought it was very interesting. There was a lot of good presentations there, a lot of interesting discussions. But do you think that the industry, the blockchain technology industry that's emerging, is at a stage now where large and painful crashes in the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency prices won't stop companies from innovating with this new exciting technology that is blockchain technology?
Yeah, it's a good question. The Bitcoin and the virtual currency markets have always been volatile. They've always been very, very volatile. It's really hard to predict what's going to happen in the markets, and it's not a rational process either. So, something that the CEO of CoinDesk in his keynote at the DC Summit, one of the slides that keeps coming back to me, and a statement he made that I've noted is that he's hoping that the media coverage will come around and focus more on the technology and less on the price. A lot of what you see the mainstream media focusing on is the price. And it's funny because I get a lot of interview requests to go on different, media channels to talk about how much Bitcoin has crashed in that day. But if you take a step back, what I always remind, the reporters and the people looking at this space is, one, we're in a very nascent technology industry. Technology is still less than 10 years old. And if you actually look at the growth of the markets on a year-to-year basis, not a day-to-day or a week-to-week or even a month-to-month, you still are seeing growth. So while the price may be down, day over day, year over year, you're seeing, thousands of percentage of increases in market capitalization. So the crash in price, or I would call it a correction, I don't think that really has much bearing on the companies that are really focused on building out blockchain technology innovations within their firms. In fact, I would say the price is really the least interesting thing you could focus on right now.
Yeah, and to add to your points there, I believe Bitcoin has crashed or corrected, large corrections or crashes at least 4 times in its history, 8 or 9 years, of over 70%. So this is nothing new, like you said. And the other thing I remember is at last year's conference, not this year's, you told an anecdote where in 2012 you were trying to build up your company, the Chamber of Digital Commerce, from the ground. And you said in 2012 you couldn't even get any meetings with anyone that was interested in, right? Because the price had crashed?
Well, not necessarily because where the price was, but when we launched, so the Chamber will be 4 years old in July. So we're almost 4. Which seems like we're a dinosaur in the blockchain industry, but we're still a very young company. And 2013 was when we were really starting to get the chamber organized, and then we formally launched it in 2014. And we launched this organization probably in the most difficult time of this industry's history. We've had much difficult times than the time we're in right now. 2013 was an exciting year. Because that was the year that Bitcoin started making international headlines. So if you want to go back a little bit through history with me, so in beginning of 2013, the price of Bitcoin was around $13. By the summer, if you remember, Cyprus was going through their bailout with the European Union, and there were a lot of questions on if Cyprus was going to leave the EU. So because of the kind of instability in the region at the time, there were people in Cyprus that started buying Bitcoin, and that got international news coverage. And because of that, the price went up almost to $1,300 just through that kind of media hype cycle that was happening at the time. So you saw this huge increase in price, and it ended up correcting quite a bit. So that was exciting, but despite that, there was also some not so great things we were seeing in the media as well. We had the Mt. Gox collapse, where $500 million worth of Bitcoin of customer funds had gone missing and lost. And you also had the Silk Road issue, where very highly publicized website that was selling illegal drugs for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. And then you also had the Liberty Reserve scandal. So there were just a lot of things that were happening that the media was focused on. And at that time, basically anything anyone knew about Bitcoin was that either Mt. Gox or that people were buying illegal drugs with it online. So the overall sentiment in Washington was fear, anxiety, and skepticism. We really, as a community, had not been able to bring to the dialogue anything better. So that was a big reason, well, one of the main reasons why we set out to establish the Chamber of Digital Commerce, because we believe this industry deserves a dedicated advocate that's helping answer those kinds of questions, explaining what is going on. These are legitimate concerns people have, but also bringing balance to the conversation and helping highlight the positive benefits of what blockchain technology can bring to society. And that's a big piece of what we do with the DC Blockchain Summit every year. It seems like anytime the topic of cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin or blockchain is talked about in Washington, it's usually around concerns regulators have. So whether that's something like Silk Road or Mt. Gox, or today there's conversations around AML issues and terrorist financing, or fraud in the securities markets. Most of the conversations are around when something goes wrong. There's very few conversations that happen in Washington about when people are doing things right. So the summit is our opportunity to bring our members to DC, give them a whole day to talk about the great things they're doing, highlight the positive work, and just bring a little bit of balance to the overall conversation. And hopefully the DC community, the members of Congress and their staffs and the agencies and law enforcement folks will go home and feel a little bit more inspired to spend more time researching what blockchain can do to benefit society rather than just focusing on the risk.
You actually answered one of my other questions before I even asked it. So I was going to ask you then if a large percentage of regulators in some of these American government agencies are very anti-Bitcoin, anti-cryptocurrency, anti-blockchain technology, like the Bank of International Settlements and Chinese government, or do you think that's a minority globally? Because, at the conference, it seemed that a lot of the American regulators have a different stance than some of these other groups I mentioned.
Yeah, and I don't think they're anti-Bitcoin or blockchain. I just think they're pro-control. I mean, when you talk about China, these are their markets and their industries are highly controlled by the government. So this has nothing to do with just Bitcoin or blockchain. It's just the way that they approach commerce in general, which is through highly centralized economic planning. But there are many other countries, leading countries around the world, who are looking to foster blockchain innovation within their borders. For example, the United Kingdom, they've created a sandbox. They're supporting blockchain companies. Even the Bank of England is looking at potential benefits of blockchain technology to their monetary policy. Same thing in Canada. There's very significant efforts underway in Canada, Singapore, all throughout the European Union. So while some companies may be hesitant, there's others that are very welcoming and doing everything they can to attract new companies and startups in this industry into their borders.
So you would describe then a lot of these countries, the United States included, as more of a tax and regulate. If you had to summarize like their position on it now, they're tax and regulate, and that they see this emerging industry, which is only a couple years old, like you said, as an industry that can potentially create new jobs and tax revenue.
I don't know if I would put the United States in that bucket. The U.S. is a much more complicated regulatory regime to navigate through. And there's other companies that are engaging in jurisdictional arbitrage and regulatory arbitrage to compete with the U.S. To bring some of the activity here into their borders. I think the U.S. wants to be friendly to blockchain, but we just have a very different structure than a lot of other nations. For example, the way we approach regulation is through a very fragmented approach. We have no less than 12 regulators on the federal level that are looking at blockchain, from the SEC to the CFTC to the IRS, FinCEN, OFAC, CFPB, FTC. The list goes on and on and on. In most countries, or in a lot of other nations, you typically will have one regulator. And so that one regulator will have some thought leadership that says, we're open for business for blockchain, come talk to us, we'll work through whatever issues or testing parameters you need to go through to get to market. Well, in the United States, it's not that easy because there's so many different regulators, and the jurisdictional borders are not always clear, and a lot of those are still being defined. And so one thing that we would really like to see in the United States is some leadership that's not only addressing the concerns regulators have about blockchain, but also having a vision and a path to make this work in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. I remember at the conference how during some of the explanations, they were talking about like how the SEC views Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as one thing, the CFTC views it as another, and then there's other government regulatory agencies as well. And that's only at the federal level. That's not even counting the states.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just give you a quick, very quick tutorial on that. So FinCEN, who is the money laundering overseer in the U.S., they're underneath the U.S. Department of Treasury. They issued guidance in 2013. They were the first government organization or entity to act. And they decided that they were going to regulate convertible virtual currency, so like Bitcoin, as currency. And then a few months later, the IRS, which is also part of Treasury, came out and said, well, we're going to tax it like property. Okay. And then the CFTC has determined that Bitcoin is a commodity. And the SEC is applying the securities laws in the blockchain space. So from a currency to property to commodity to security, it's very difficult and very treacherous to have to navigate through that. And actually, just this past week, I was in San Francisco at Draper University, and one of the members there said he was in a conversation with some entrepreneurs in the space, and what they felt like was that in order to comply, it's almost impossible to comply with all of the regulations, because you're almost certain if you're complying with one regulatory body, you're probably not in compliance with another. So we do have some pretty significant coordination issues, and that's something that's going to have to be addressed if we want to be a leader in blockchain in the United States.
Yeah, we've discussed this on the last interview. That is frustrating with all the regulatory environment. So there's a number of really popular articles going around Wall Street in the last couple months as Bitcoin and the other cryptocurrencies prices were falling. Another of these articles just came out from a very well-respected banking analyst on Wall Street this week. I sent it over to you guys. So many Wall Street Bitcoin and cryptocurrency bears claim that after being invented about a decade ago, that blockchain technology, while the technology itself sounds good, still has no valid use cases. So how many different industries are either testing out or implementing, integrating, innovating with blockchain technology now? And maybe you can name some of these examples for why these Wall Street bears who are very anti-cryptocurrency are wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's just nonsense. I've traveled the world and met with many of the world's largest companies that have very significant blockchain practices underway. The reality is this technology is less than 10 years old, and it takes time to build something of this magnitude. So just to put that in perspective, HTTP took 10 years to build. So the protocol that allowed us to enable email took 10 years after the internet had already been incubated out of DARPA for almost 20 years. So this is not something that's going to happen fast. And I think, traders and people on Wall Street, they think in seconds and milliseconds and not, more long term. Some examples of where blockchain technology has very clear use cases. The first would be in financial services and in clearing and settlement. Goldman Sachs Investment Research estimates that by implementing blockchain technology to streamline the clearing and settlement of cash securities and the capital markets, up to $2 billion in the U.S. and $6 billion globally can be saved per year. This is a report from Goldman Sachs. A very similar report came from Santander, reporting that banks could save anywhere between $15 to $20 billion annually by the year 2022 by implementing blockchain for back office infrastructure costs. It's very widely accepted and known, and there's many studies that have been published not only by financial institutions but also central banks about the benefits blockchain can bring into back office use cases, streamlining a lot of processes that are currently overseen by intermediaries and other middlemen, but also implementing better systems for transparency and cutting out a lot of the paper cuts of the way we do clearing and settlement today. Another good example is in insurance. So some of the potential benefits of blockchain technology in the insurance industry include modernizing legacy IT systems to improve efficiency, increasing automation using smart contracts. You can decrease the need for manual inputs by decreasing human error. By using blockchain and smart contracts, you can increase your cybersecurity and IT systems through improved privacy protections. You can decrease fraud with transparent ledgers and improve data sharing between parties. This is coming from studies from the insurance industry, including Deloitte, but also B3I, which is the blockchain insurance industry initiative that's in the European Union. So it's not just me, this is also the industry saying this. And then the third industry that I would highlight would be blockchain and healthcare. There's a lot of interoperability issues in healthcare with data silos, administrative overhead, significant amounts of inefficiencies. For example, over 15 billion worth of transactions are still done using fax machines today in the health industry. Using blockchain technology for electronic health records can improve identity, information sharing, the auditability, efficiencies, and provide a more patient-centered healthcare experience. And this is coming from studies from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and also the healthcare industry. So there are many, many industries that have very significant blockchain practices underway. This stuff is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time because you're dealing with legacy IT systems that, realistically are not going to be ripped out and replaced. It's going to take a full production lifestyle and technology life cycle to get new technologies implemented. But I can assure you that this is underway and it is happening.
Yeah, I remember at the conference last year, I don't remember him presenting this year, but there was a vice president of IBM presenting last year, and he said he was getting paid like about 17 hours a day to install blockchain technology software in the back end for a lot of large companies. So at this year's conference, there was presentations from executives there from or upper management from Microsoft, from Cisco. So I guess a lot of these large companies then, maybe they haven't fully implemented blockchain technology yet, but they are, testing it out and they are working on ways to integrate it in the future.
Yep, I would agree with that.
So would you say then that the size range of companies testing out using blockchain runs the entire gamut of, companies as large as Microsoft, Facebook, et cetera, all the way down to startup and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of different types of companies that are looking at blockchain technology. Even just looking at the membership of the chamber, we represent all those who are investing in and innovating with blockchain-based technologies. We have about 160 member companies today, and that includes some of the largest banks and financial institutions in the world, like Wells Fargo and BNY and BNP, the CME, NASDAQ. We also represent technology companies, so IBM, Microsoft, Cisco, consultancies, so the Accentures of the world, Deloitte, KPMGs, they all have blockchain practices underway. But the mass majority of our members are startups. So these are small private companies, really the pioneers, the technology innovators, looking to pave the way for this new technology frontier. So it really affects a very wide class of stakeholders. And so it's very interesting times, and it's super exciting to be able to bring together a lot of different types of people that have very dynamic conversations.
Have you run into any industries or companies that are very anti-blockchain technology, like maybe gold mining companies or credit card processing companies, or some of the remittance companies like MoneyGram or Western Union?
It's funny you asked that. So you mentioned gold mining. We have a member company. Their name's Responsible Gold, and they're actually working with the gold industry to help implement the World Gold Council's standards around the ethical mining of gold practices. So there are some issues in the gold industry in terms of unethical labor, like child labor, also addressing Nazi gold and other pieces of the supply chain that do not meet the World Gold Council standards. And so they're building out a supply chain where they go directly to the mine. They verify that they're meeting the standards, and then they tokenize the gold all the way through its life cycle, through its supply chain, all the way to the manufacturer, to the retailer, wherever its end product may be, to be able to, with 100% accuracy, be able to say to the end user or consumer that this gold that you are purchasing was done so in a way that meets these particular standards. So blockchain can actually bring benefits to industries that may not be obvious through using a distributed ledger. And then in terms of industries that may be against this, just through some of the political intelligence that we have here at the Chamber and the many conversations we have in the policy process, there may be some hesitancy from the securities industry. So we are hearing that there are people within the securities industry that are lobbying for much stricter regulations around blockchain technology. And I really wish they wouldn't look at it this way. I wish they would see, like the gold industry has, that by flipping this around in a particular way, that with blockchain technology, you can actually have a much more efficient and accurate and transparent process. So, there's always going to be incumbents that feel threatened, but, hopefully they will be able to come around and be able to understand that the benefits of blockchain absolutely outweigh the risk of losing revenue in one area, but being able to tap into, trillion-dollar opportunities by leveraging this technology in new areas.
I hope you're enjoying our interview with Perianne Boring. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Do you work out routinely and eat healthy almost all the time? If you eat paleo or vegan or work out routinely, you may be eligible to save up to 33% off on your life insurance thanks to HealthIQ. HealthIQ is a venture capital-backed, big data technology life insurance company that offers customers life insurance at special rates by using the latest technologies. For more information, please go to healthiq.com/WS4MS. That's healthiq.com/WS4MS. That example you mentioned with the gold mine, that kind of reminds me of that IBM TV commercial that we've seen where they're using blockchain now to track diamonds basically from when they were mined to show that the diamonds that you buy maybe for an engagement ring or something like that at a jewelry store were not conflict diamonds or blood diamonds because they can be tracked all the way through the supply chain with blockchain.
Yeah, it can apply really to anything, and this is something that could really be attractive to even down to certain state producers. So, if you wanted to prove the authenticity of Atlantic raised salmon, you could do that. Or Wyoming cattle. You wanted to be able to prove to your end consumer that this meat that you're buying came from the state of Wyoming. Or you could apply the same concept to anything. We're seeing a lot in the luxury goods space where knockoffs are a big issue, where you would have a token that represents that product, and that token would be with that product, and you could, with blockchain and distributed ledger technology, with 100% accuracy, be able to see exactly where that article came from, and that it is exactly what whoever's selling it to you says it is. You can also address things like food safety. So this is something that IBM is doing with Walmart. So a pretty big use case underway in terms of being able to track where certain food is coming from certain farms in other areas of the world. God forbid something goes wrong, you can trace back the issue back to the exact place it came from and be able to address it. So think of things like salmonella recalls, where they just have to recall everything because they don't know necessarily exactly what farm it came from. By tracking everything on a public ledger, you would have a lot more accuracy and transparency in terms of what exactly it is that is in your hands at any given time. So there's a lot of benefits of blockchain, not just in financial services, but across a wide range of industries, and supply chain is certainly attractive to a lot of manufacturers.
That's very interesting. Yeah, there was a great presentation at the last DC Blockchain Summit where the guy showed the history of champagne from the grapes and how the authenticity of the champagne now can be tracked using sensors where the grapes were grown and using the blockchain to track that. So that would apply to your supply chain and also luxury goods.
Yeah, and everybody likes champagne, right? So that's a fun one. I enjoyed that one.
I do like champagne, but I don't recommend playing beer pong with it. But that's another story for another day.
You gotta class it up, Jason.
Well, I had hiccups for 24 hours after I did on New Year's, so that was, yeah, I learned the hard way. And anyways, though, so in terms of, some of these other technologies besides blockchain, so at the conference they talked about Internet of Things, and Internet of Things by itself, as a libertarian, it sounds invasive. How, my blender can have access to the internet, all my appliances will have access to the internet, but it seems that, I guess, blockchain technology, or at least some companies, are working on integrating blockchain technology with Internet of Things.
So absolutely. So Internet of Things is definitely another area within technology that could very well be complemented with blockchain. Another area where we've already seen this is smart contracts. So smart contracts is not new. The term was coined in 1994 by Nick Szabo, and by taking smart contracts and layering that on top of blockchain technology, you can actually realize a whole new set of benefits. AI is another one, artificial intelligence, by being able to use blockchain with the data set that AI requires, is also another way that you can leverage blockchain for other industries in much more powerful ways. So yes, you're right about that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I'm kind of against Internet of Things, but if blockchain is going to provide with the cryptography that's built into the blockchain technology code, so I don't want anyone hacking any of my appliances and creating like a crazy movie, because today is Friday the 13th when we're recording. As a libertarian, though, Perianne, I know you worked on the Ron Paul campaign a while ago. Are you worried that blockchain technology, though, can be used by many governments for nefarious purposes to implement a digital government? Fiat cryptocurrency is part of, a dystopian cashless society where cash and other forms of payments are banned. Every transaction is tracked and taxed. Do you think some governments are at least considering this, or from your conversations with governments, you don't think they're considering this at all?
I think that is a very bold statement. I certainly hope not. That is not something that keeps me up at night. I believe that blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies provide an alternative to these central-based monetary policy regimes and the global fiat experiment that we're all a part of today. Since the breakdown of the Bretton Woods system and between the 1970s and the 1980s, we've all been on these floating fiat currencies where, the Fed and the respective central banks basically have a monopoly on money. And what blockchain technology provides is an alternative where you can use something new to transact in your daily life. So it's not about necessarily breaking down a particular system or attacking the Fed. I think that's a little far out there. But this does allow consumers to have another option. And I believe in a free country that we should have the freedom to choose what we use as money, whether that's something the government sponsors, like the U.S. dollar, or gold or silver, or something as innovative and fun and creative as Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. So I think it adds a lot to that conversation, and I hope that conversation will continue to be fostered, because there are a lot of places where it makes sense to use something different, and we should have the freedom to be able to do that.
Amen. I completely agree about competing currencies and freedom of choice. So if you want to use cash or pay with your smartphone, you should have the option to do so. What worries me is some of these governments could potentially hijack the technology. They haven't done it yet, but I know some of these governments, like the People's Bank of China and others, are hiring blockchain computer programmers. And, worst case scenario, that is something they're thinking of. Have you seen, though, that some of these companies now are actually working on gold-backed cryptocurrencies? Have any of those companies joined the Chamber of Digital Commerce?
We have Responsible Gold, which is kind of similar. It's tracking gold issuances, and there are a handful of companies that are experimenting with gold-backed digital currency, and we are looking at that pretty closely. And one of our board of advisors, George Gilder, has actually called Bitcoin digital gold. So that relationship between Bitcoin and gold, for those who are a gold bug or who believe in a gold standard or really believe in the benefits that gold can bring to a monetary system, a lot of those people find Bitcoin and blockchain technology also attractive because of the limited supply of Bitcoin and what you can implement with other cryptocurrencies. So you have this deflationary activity as opposed to inflationary. So there's certainly a lot of crossover between the two.
Yeah, I agree. I think gold and Bitcoin complement each other pretty well, but there's a lot of people who are going to listen to this interview who are it's kind of in the other camp where they're either very pro gold and silver and anti Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, or now because cryptocurrencies have been outperforming gold and silver, they flipped. So they're very pro Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now they're anti gold and silver, but I don't agree with either camp. I'm kind of in between where why do we have to hate on one or the other?
Yeah, I mean, I was a gold bug before I learned about Bitcoin, and I certainly can understand that. And really what I think is attractive about Bitcoin is that it has some additional attributes that gold does not provide, and that it's digital. So for thousands and thousands of years, societies have flocked to gold and silver as a form of money. But in a digital world, we really need to innovate the way that we look at monetary systems. And one of the big challenges of gold is the security around it. So that, the security practice of gold is locking it up. Digital currencies provide a cybersecurity innovation on top of that. So it's much more portable. You can also transport it much more larger quantities, much more easily than gold. So I just see it as an evolution, and there's some added benefits to it. But gold and silver are also important as well.
Yeah, I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I've got to run. Thank you so much for having me on the call today and on your podcast. I look forward to hearing it. I appreciate you coming to the summit and for your support, Jason.
You're welcome, and keep up the great work. You're doing a fantastic job there.
Okay, thank you.
Please like this video, share it with friends and family, and don't forget to subscribe to the Wall Street from Main Street YouTube channel if you have not already done so. We're closing in on the 20,000 YouTube channel subscriber milestone, despite YouTube censorship. And hopefully we'll be able to get to 30,000 or even 40,000 YouTube channel subscribers quickly if YouTube doesn't shut down the channel. If YouTube does shut down this channel, remember to also sign up for the Wall Street from Main Street email list that's on the wallstreetfrommainstreet.com website and will tell you where the videos are going to be uploaded instead of YouTube. Also, if you really like the content and you decide that you want to give a one-time donation, you can go to the wallstreetfrommainstreet.com website where there's different options for you to do so. Or you can become a Patreon contributor. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to providing you guys with some of the best information, analysis, and financial education available out there for free or paid.